Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Leaders and Friends. I'm really honored today to have a great friend of mine, Pascale Witz, who I've known for almost 30 years. I remember meeting Pascale at a dinner in Paris. She was, I think, a young X-ray product manager or something like that. And then she went on to have a spectacular career at GE, ran almost all of Sanofi, which is one of the big European pharmaceutical companies, has been on boards, has served on the board of INSEAD, and has lived around the world. So this is truly a great leader, great healthcare leader, great global leader. So Pascale, welcome. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jeff, first of all, and great to see you as well. And I'm really excited about being able to be on this interview with you. So it's interesting because I think I owe a lot of my career to what I learned at GE. But if I backtrack a little bit, actually, I'm a biochemistry engineer trained in France and then studied molecular biology. I thought I would develop drugs for a living and save the world. So I started a PhD, and after 2 years, I realized the pace of fundamental research was not fast enough for my profile or my style. So I jumped to the industry, and actually I jumped into pharma by the way of joining Becton Dickinson Pharmaceutical Systems. And that's actually where I started leading teams, presenting budget. And after 5 years of and two jobs, I realized that I actually needed a much more solid background in economy, finance, management as well, because that's not what I had studied. And I decided to invest in my own development and go to INSEAD for 1 year. And that's after INSEAD that I realized, well, now I'd like to do something different. I really loved Becton Dickinson, but I wanted to experiment something different. And that's when my paths crossed GE. And at the time, it was the most admired company in the world. I thought, hey, it would be not a good idea to turn down the offer. I'll spend 2 to 3 years. And as you just said, we know each other for a long time, and I ended up spending 17 plus years at GE, GE Healthcare, all of that in GE Healthcare, and all my career was in healthcare.
Mhm.
And for me, GE is really where I learned leadership, operational excellence, and change management. And for me, these were fundamentals for the whole career that I built.
Now
So
you, Pascal, you've shifted, you've been in one of the few people actually, even in the healthcare community, that's been in devices, life sciences, biotech. So in addition to kind of this foundational business acumen, what made you so versatile over your career?
well, I think the first thing is that I'm very curious. The second thing is that, as I said, it's a little bit odd because the medtech people, including at GE, you didn't know that, but all my colleagues were computer science engineer, mechanical engineer, software engineer. I was the Miss Molecule, as some of them were calling me. So I had a different, I had also an engineering background, but it was much more oriented towards life sciences. And so for several years, I thought I would go back to pharma, and but then it happened within GE because GE acquired Amersham,
Right.
and you tapped into me to become the CEO of GE's pharmaceutical diagnostics, as they call it now. And for me, I couldn't have had a better training because through BD, Becton Dickinson, I knew the depths of supply chain, chemistry, and tech transfer to industrialization, QA, QC, I mean, quality control, quality assurance. I knew the customers. Then with GE, I knew the clients of what Amersham was selling. And so when I moved to become the CEO of Amersham, then I had to dig into the development, the drug development. I mean, they were used for diagnostic purposes, but it was a real pharma company where the R&D and the regulations were proper pharma.
Now,
And
was that your first time in the US, Pascal, when you took that job?
actually not. My second role at GE was in the US, in Milwaukee, when you were the CEO of GE
Uh-huh.
Healthcare still. So that's where we got to know each other a lot
Yeah.
better, which was for me also a transformative experience. I mean, just seeing very quickly the power of the organization and learning different ways of working, which again were a great fit for my style, I think.
Hmm. And I remember like when I took over GE Healthcare, Pascal, like Welch said to me, you're going to hate the business in Europe because everybody's so French, and it turned out that almost all the executives I met in our European business were fantastic. Were really amazing at what they did. Like, what was it about the kind of was it the French education system? Was it the fact that it
So
was so hard to be an industrialist? You guys were all so scrappy and creative. How did that happen?
how am I going to summarize it? Maybe I'll start with an example and then I'll walk back through what are the causes or the reasons,
Yeah.
because there are causes and reasons. The Olympics, take the Olympics. Every single person I know who went to the Olympics was flabbergasted by how great an event it was, how well
Mhm.
organized it was, how nice the people were. I can guarantee you that everybody who was working in the process to get there with the French team up until 2 months before was convinced that nothing would be ready.
Yeah.
Um, so what is leading to that is that I think that what people see about France is a lot about what is advertised, and I think the French advertise a lot demonstration. We have an education where critiquing is part of the education. It's our way of critical thinking.
Hmm.
And I think people are very vocal about it, and that's what people see. I remember when the law passed for the 35 years that everybody was joking about, but anybody that you would interact to, and not the shop floor workers, but anybody else would joke that the 35 hours were done by Wednesday noon. And people work really hard. So I think we have a great education, particularly for engineering, computer science, all these hard science still today. I mean, look at the latest valuation of Mistral, an AI company, 14 billion. Um, this is actually based on the depth and the quality of the engineer and the scientist that we have.
Hmm.
However, and I was a good experiment, I think it has evolved since then, but the reason I went to INSEAD is that through all my studies, I had almost zero training in economy, in finance. Commercial is not part of the basic education of the best students.
Hmm.
So it is evolving. You know, we have great business schools. I mean, French business school for bachelor and masters. But I think this is where we're suffering a little bit from an image that is a disconnect from
Hmm.
what the people are doing. So great engineer, people are working a lot. They complain a lot, but if you can pass through that, you can get a lot done.
I think a lot done. Talk about your transition from GE to Sanofi, both in terms of the industry, but also in terms of the company and the culture.
Oh, well. So everybody was telling me from GE, be careful because you're not going to find at GE the same type of organization. I think that what surprised me the most and what I never really realized at GE, because it was the same at BD before, it's the openness for feedback, the willing to learn from anything that we had just done, that nobody was feeling bad about mistakes. And I feel that this is also one of the things that is actually probably hindering a little bit the people in Europe. It's not specific to France, but they're a lot more risk averse. You would
Mm.
think that because they have a better social protection, they can take risk, but the appetite for risk, because of a variety of things, is that when people take risk and fail, it's still today not really well recognized. Whereas in the US, you would say, well, he or she tried, she has probably learned, and therefore we can trust her more than before.
Hmm.
And so that way of getting to get people to really say what they think, because there were a lot of great people. One of the things I'm the most proud of is how I was able to transform the culture within my team, which was quite large. But the first time I had a strategy meeting and I asked people to tell me what they think we should do, they spent the first week trying to find out what I wanted to hear. I
Yeah,
never had, I was what, 45, and I had never faced such a situation. So that was a big difference. And
yeah.
then the other thing is that I still remember when Chris Webacher was trying to recruit me, he was going through, well, you're perfect, you know pharma, you know devices, and Sanofi had a very large diabetes division where there were pens and auto-injectors that were important for the drug delivery. So I had a great background for that, but he was going through the reasons why I should join. And the last one was, plus you're French. And I couldn't help and said, but that's the problem.
That's right.
And in my mind, I feel very French, but I also knew that in France, particularly at the time, remember, it was like now it was 15 years ago plus,
Right.
more or less. They never had a woman at the executive committee in an operational role, not even at the level below.
Right.
So there was a cultural change and difference. And from that standpoint, when people don't expect you there, they tend to think that you're not qualified.
Mhm.
Although I had been the CEO of a pharma company, which many of my colleagues had not been.
Mhm.
So, and also there is a little bit of a culture that in big pharma, there is only big pharma that counts, which again has
Mhm.
evolved a lot in the last 10 years. But at the time, these were two different worlds. The pharma world was a very large blockbuster, enormous sales force. And the people who were not risk averse were in biotech because this is
Right.
where you had to fight for your life to
Right.
develop drugs. So that I think were the big the big differences, and much more than just the culture
Mhm.
of the company itself. And then you have the European way of the speed of decision making is much slower. So
Mhm. Talk about
and
Pascal. You now have done boards with small companies, startups, small publics, private equity.
yeah.
Talk about your transition to kind of being a board member.
So I always thought that I would learn from being on the board. The first boards that I joined, I thought it was because it would help me see it from the board side.
Hmm.
But then it just happened that when I left Sanofi, I was wondering what I should do. And quite frankly, I didn't think I would jump to boards at the time, but very quickly I realized that I was going through a lot of interviews, looking at a lot of um, big, actually a lot of big turnarounds. So
Hmm.
everything that was offered to me was either a big company, I mean, a big division of a very large company, or a CEO role that was to be turned around. And I think I did that successfully with the Amersham acquisition. I mean, with the GE Pharmaceutical Diagnostics. I did that successfully with a pharma division at Sanofi because we had a lot of transformation and it was at a tipping point with product launches. Everything sounded like more of the same.
Mm.
And I thrive by learning new things, learning, facing new challenges. So I thought, okay, I can't really motivate myself for any of that. And at the same time, everybody was knocking on the door to be CEOs of biotech, but that I knew I would not want to do. But I loved helping the CEOs. So I did a couple of projects, advising them with consulting, and I loved it, but I didn't want to run any of them. And I was approached by very nice companies who wanted me on their board. And I was like, okay, I keep saying no, but the other side, the executive roles, I can't get excited.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I do that. And if I don't like it, I was young enough that I could jump back. And after 2, 3 years, I realized I actually loved it. And I love it because of the diversity of the portfolio that I built. The fact
Hmm.
that I can do from super early, I chair a biotech company where we are super early stage that is working on Charcot-Marie-Tooth, Augustine Therapeutics. But I'm also serving on the board and I was chair of the audit committee and now chair the compensation committee of Fresenius Medical Care,
Right.
the number one dialysis company. And each of them have an interest for me. Private equity is more about coaching the CEOs and the leadership to run companies. They're much smaller companies, but you help them how to run a business. I'm very proud of how good the CEO of a company I chair has become in a couple years. And
What do you find the most important advice you give to a CEO? Like what's because you've done the job, like what's the one thing that you tend to find connects the most with them?
so I don't know if there is one thing, but I always realize I have to advise them that they have to keep enough time for the strategy and the reflection. So
Hmm.
finding enough time to think about the organization, finding enough time to think about where is it that you want to go and how you're going to go there. The trap I feel that CEOs tend to fall into is to not giving themselves or not organizing themselves to have the time
Hmm.
to reflect.
Yeah,
And
no, I think
that's
that's
where
good.
you lose, then you lose the lucidity of what is
Hmm.
happening.
Hmm.
So that's, I think, a
Let's talk
very
about
big
a
one.
couple. I think that's great. I think you know, like simple things like time management, long-term planning, doing fewer things better. That's what I find, Pascal. I both small and large company CEOs like do fewer things, do them better. Don't, think with more clarity, things
And
like
spend
that. But
time finding the right people. I
yeah,
think
the
the other
people.
thing is that spend time. I mean, this was one of the basics at GE as well, right? Is surround
Yeah.
yourself with great talent and spend time to hire the right talent, but also, interestingly enough, also help them develop themselves. At
Mhm.
times, it can be coaching them to be patient with them because people need to grow as well. So all this is important, but I would say that as a chair or even as a board member or advisor, I am when people try to ask me what I do exactly, it's so broad. It's
Mhm.
a sparring partner, it's coach, is because I have seen so much and I'm not a nose into it. I can actually have a bit more distance.
Mhm.
And the way I work usually is I bombard people with questions. And
Mhm.
and even on a topic that I don't necessarily know much about, just by asking all these questions, I can actually understand the situation and lead the CEO to realize that there is an answer to his own question. So
Yeah, no,
it,
that's
it,
great
it sounds
advice.
very Socratic, but actually I feel I do a lot of that, and
It's
apparently I do it quite well.
Good advice. Maybe a couple bigger topics while we have you, like talk about how you think about healthcare today. I would say, like in the US, it kind of feels like a mess right now and on a macro level, but like what
Well,
encourages you about healthcare and what discourages you about healthcare today?
so I'm super optimistic about healthcare just because the very optimistic piece is the convergence of this tech in a broad sense, tech and AI in healthcare, I think is only going to accelerate medical innovation.
Hmm.
And that's why I had written that book, and that's all my thinking about what you could do with it.
Hmm.
That has driven me probably for the past 15 years. I think that today we could do a lot more with the technology as it is today. But then the sad side of it is that it's the organization, the way the incentives are working, that
Hmm.
make the system not adopting innovation as fast as we could. So on one hand, I'm super optimistic because I know that the progress of this innovation are so fast that it is going to really continue transforming healthcare and improving it. My holy grail is when AI will be able to be used to do complex diagnosis on the
Hmm.
basis of the individual. You know, what is your own baseline, and with all the data, heterogeneous data analysis, you can understand what is happening and
Hmm.
ideally move towards more prevention. However, the challenge we have, and it's true in the US, but in a sense it's true everywhere, all the healthcare systems in the Western world have been developed for acute medicine, preventing
Hmm.
people to die. So it's heavy on very powerful medicine, but costly. And now we're an aging population. We all have two or three diseases or conditions, as we should call them, that requires healthcare, but we don't have the system that is set up for this type of healthcare. So it costs too much for what we have. But I do think again that leveraging technology should be able to help. The challenge that is specific to the US is the fragmentation of the healthcare systems. I mean, when you think about, regularly people are, because I work in pharma, people are telling me, but don't you think the prices are too high? But everybody has an incentive for high prices, actually. The
Mhm.
PBM will take a chunk of the rebates that they will have. Everybody is actually happy, despite what they say, they're happy with higher prices. And in the
Mhm.
end, now we have higher copays because the system cannot afford it. And the patient finally realizes how much it costs.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's so much promise, but the superstructure of regulation is really challenging, I think, in the US. Talk a little bit about, Pascal, you've got a unique perspective on, kind of growing up in Europe and being a global CEO, and your children are very much, kind of children of the world and things like that. But, kind of like, how do you see globalization today? How do you see Europe, and what are some of
Wow.
your observations about, how do you think it all kind of plays out over the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, the first thing is actually, I think I grew up, or professionally, I grew up in the best of the world where it was globalizing and everybody wanted to work with everyone.
Hmm.
So I think we got the best out of it, and I find it a little bit sad that we are going, to my taste, we are going backwards there.
Hmm.
But I really enjoyed this global environment that I found at GE. To some extent, although I'm French and all your listeners will hear my French accent, in Paris, they think I work like an American. And anyway, I was born in Switzerland and I'm from Alsace, so I'm not the typical French. So, in Alsace, we talk about being from Alsace and then French and European, probably on an equal setting. So
Hmm.
the second thing I would say about Europe being from Alsace, where the border moved from left to right a couple of times over the different wars, and that's actually pretty deep in my own family. So for me, Europe is very important, but I think that sometimes people forget that the Europe at the core was a peace project. And if you
Hmm.
think about it that way, it has succeeded pretty well.
Hmm.
Now it has evolved, and in the evolution, it's not as efficient because it tries to be sort of the United States of Europe, but it's not structured, nor has anybody decided that it would be the United States of Europe. So,
Hmm.
particularly to all Americans who tell me, well, it doesn't work, it's because, I mean, a lot of that is because they have in mind that it should work like the United States, but that was never the intention, and therefore it's not structured that way.
Yeah.
Now, um, I'm actually at times very frustrated with Europe, with how much it costs for what it delivers. But again, remember the peace project that has 100% delivered. But at times,
Hmm.
I'm also realizing, in the past few years, I think that the geopolitics have actually done probably more for European countries to rally more towards each other.
Hmm.
Everybody, like in the US, suffers from the polarization of the world, but Europe has actually gotten better. Is it working? Still not. But, you know, you have to look at the long trend, and here and there, let's hope that people will find a way to make it work.
Yeah, yeah. No, so much talent there. Pascal, just before we wrap, you've had a spectacular career. You were like a track star when you were young. You're like the prototype of, like, kind of the A student who's, really touched so many lives and done so much great work. And now you're like associate with INSEAD. You have the next generation, two children. What advice do you give people that want to kind of live your life or live a life to the fullest? What's your go-to advice?
Well, the first thing I have to think about, I think you were one of the persons saying that great career only look great in retrospect, right? On the day
Yeah.
to day, it's a tough day after another.
Yeah.
And from that standpoint, my track and field career was helpful because what you have to realize is that when you train, you always train for the next level.
Hmm.
So although now I'm very proud that I was part of the junior national French team, at the time I missed the qualification for the European Championship. I never made it to the Olympics. And it was a big failure. So I feel that it made you learn about failure, and it made me learn about what is important. And my take was always you have to do everything so that you have no regret.
Hmm.
And so you train during the whole year so that you have no regret. And this is what is your driving force, because then it happens what happens. If it doesn't work, at least you did your best.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I have in mind to have to be really ready to do what it takes to succeed. And no job comes with no work. It's usually hard work. The
Hmm.
second thing is that I think I remember some people were telling me, even at GE, oh, but you were lucky, you went to the US. Yeah, but when we went to the US, our income from the couple divided by two because my husband was working and he couldn't work at the time in the US. It's just that we were very interested in the experience and we wanted to do that. And I
Hmm.
think it has been one of my driver is don't be too picky on what you're going to gain short term financially. But I've always looked at the job with, am I going to learn something? Am I going to have an impact? And can I work with the team I'm going to work? And I think
Hmm.
with my boards, I have had the same approach. I need to like the CEO. I need to feel that I'm relevant and can help the company. And I need to feel that I'm going to learn something as well. Otherwise, I don't find that the balance is right.
Hmm. Hmm. I think the comment on athletics, like when I first, let's say, became CEO, people would ask me about playing football, and I would say it taught me about teamwork and competition, all that stuff. By the time I retired, I said it taught me how to deal with failure in real time. That's a much
Isn't
more
it?
it's a much more relevant way to think about it than anything else. Yeah. Just
It
before,
is,
I,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, Pascal, but I always ask people maybe as the final question, like, give me one prediction. You can pick it wherever it comes from about like what's the how's the world going to be different in 5 years or 10 years or what's something we should all be thinking about or looking forward to or be afraid of when you think about the future.
Well, I'll try to be on the optimistic side because of with the current geopolitics, I think there is enough to worry about.
Right.
But and because I'm passionate about healthcare, I really think that actually we are at a point where the power of AI and technology will finally allow us to manage and handle the personal health situation of the individual.
Hmm.
Uh, Despite what I said earlier, that there are challenges of who is going to pay for it, I
Right.
do think that we are finally at a stage where the tech people who come into healthcare have been in there for long enough that they understand how it works. So my prediction would be that within the next 10 years, we'll be able to have much more powerful diagnostics so that we can actually fine tune to develop a therapeutic solution for the patient instead of throwing drugs at the patients.
Hmm. That's fantastic. That's a great vision. Well, Pascal, it's great to see you. I wish you continued success. I hope we get a chance to see each other in person sometime soon. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and it was a great pleasure talking to you, Jeff. See you soon.
See you soon, Pascal. Thanks.
Bye.